I don't know.
And so we'll get started. The way I usually do things is that when people come, I try to, as quickly as possible, welcome them on the call. And so occasionally you'll hear me, hopefully, as people join, welcome people. But otherwise, so I want to thank Daniel Alfon for co-hosting this call with me. Daniel is a LinkedIn expert. In fact, Daniel, not just a LinkedIn expert, Daniel's been on LinkedIn since like before they had the idea to start the website back in 2004. Seriously, I honestly, I thought, if you would have asked me, I thought LinkedIn was started in like 2008, but obviously not, because you were there in 2004. So Daniel is also the author of a book called How to Build a LinkedIn Profile for Business Success, an ultimate guide. And his website is, it's danielalfon.com, although right now,
right.
That's it, yeah?
It's fine, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes,
and on his website, he has a mailing list where he provides LinkedIn secrets for success, specifically business success. But of course, a lot of those secrets are useful for anyone, networking and so on with LinkedIn. So yeah, Daniel, thank you so much for co-hosting, and also on short notice.
Thanks for having me, and I look forward to the call.
Awesome. And so, as we mentioned 2 minutes ago, so Sarah, you're the first guest here, but there will usually be other guests joining. We've had numbers of the first call. I think we were almost 30 people at one point, but people come and go. And so, I've opened up the calls just with anyone if anyone has questions. And so, Sarah, do you have a specific question that you're hoping to get answered, or is there something you want to hear about? That we can kick off?
No, I mean, I just want to hear what, I'm always open to hearing new things. I teach career development classes to in different ways. Obviously now there's a little less going on, but I actually do have one Zoom seminar tomorrow on this topic. So I figured it's good to learn any extra things I could pick up.
Cool. Okay. I just want to say hi to A. Rucker. I'm not sure what your first name is. It sounds like that's your initial and a last name, but thank you for joining in. So I'll open up something. So one of the current, I mean, these are open-ended calls, but of course we're living in the times that we're living in, and so people really want to hear about how they can take advantage of the tools available and the time available specifically. Most people are isolated at home, and so they want to know what they can do to make the best of it. And one of the things that we've been mentioning quite a bit is in the past few calls is taking advantage of the time for, on the one hand, learning new skills, but on the other hand, networking. And of course, when we come to networking, it's natural to think of LinkedIn. And so, Daniel, are you seeing people taking advantage of LinkedIn more than usual, or have you noticed people using it a little bit differently because of what's going on right now?
I would say people are more on LinkedIn now because, as you just mentioned, people are at home.
Yeah.
Whereas in general, LinkedIn users tend to go to LinkedIn either when they look for a job or when they want to network. And now, since we're online for a lot of time a day, more people are using LinkedIn. I couldn't say they'd use it differently. Not still. Okay.
And so, like, do you like, I know, for example, like for me, I'm not a typical user of LinkedIn, obviously. The impression, I think, Hannah, who was the co-host in the first call, Hannah Morgan of CareerSherpa.net. So she made a good point where she was saying that most people, they're using LinkedIn, they don't spend hours a day on LinkedIn, right? They just they may get an invite that will get them to the site just to click accept the connection, or someone will send them a message, and so that will pull them to the site. Unless, of course, part of their job involves using LinkedIn to reach out to other people. And so, of course, people have a tendency to forget about their networking until they realize that they need it.
That's a very important issue, because most people in general, most LinkedIn users only remember their network when we've got our back to the wall and we need to do something.
Right.
And that's probably the worst way to think about our network.
Yeah.
Because people don't like that you only remember them when you have a need and when you need something from them. And it's a lot less time consuming and a lot easier to spend, 15 minutes a week getting in touch with two people rather than harassing them down the road in 6 months, and it will be less efficient.
So that's actually something that I find really interesting. So as an expert, what do you recommend? Or so you mentioned, okay, so 15 minutes a week. Someone, let's say, who's employed, who is not actively spending all their time being a telemarketer and harassing people for things. What do you consider a good, realistic habit that people should follow, or a list of habits that people should follow to keep their network warm or slowly build it? Or what do you think people should be doing regularly? Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's a great question. I think what we would suggest is use or leverage the notification area LinkedIn has on the top navigation bar to get notified and to reach out, not on LinkedIn, but using email, WhatsApp, or phone call, either when someone you're connected with has a birthday or when they start a new job. Like you and I know that most people will either ignore it or use the one-click congrats or happy birthday.
Right.
And, the 40th message you see, you probably ignore it.
Totally.
A better way to do it would be to actually visit a person's profile and then use either the email you will see as his or her connection on the contact info and reach out to them and ask them how they've been and wish them a happy birthday and maintain the warm relationship you had before you need anything from that person. That's not very time consuming. Right. Unless you have thousands of connections, it could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes a week. And if the person has updated his or her profile saying that they've started a new job, it would also be wiser to actually visit their profile and scroll down and see when did they start a new job. Because the fact they updated a profile today does not necessarily mean they've just started that position.
Right.
In other words, we could be congratulating someone who's joined the company, 6 months ago, or even is about to leave a company. So it doesn't have to be time consuming to keep in touch with people. And it's better for our long-term, it's not the last time job seekers will look for a job in 2020. And maintain.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So if you have people on your LinkedIn that you don't really know, but somehow they became, somehow you have some kind of connection with them, and doesn't it seem a little bit artificial to wish them happy birthday or congratulate them if you've actually never met them, as opposed to some people who you kind of know or maybe had something to do with?
Okay.
I like that question. It's good.
I'm wondering how they somehow became connected, but I'll leave that aside. And I'll say two things. A, you can say, Sarah, that you only do this for people you actually know. In other words, you have maybe 30% of your network that you do know. Reaching out to them and seeing how they've been is better than doing nothing at all.
Okay.
And the long-term question is, why are we connected to someone who's not important enough for us to reach out to on a general basis? Because if we don't find it easy to reach out to them when we don't need them, then down the road, it won't be easier. It'll be tougher. And one key question is, who do you want to be connected with?
Right. So do you recommend, if I have a bunch of people that I have no idea how I got connections, I should sort of unconnect them or something like that?
I'll be glad to hear Jacob's thoughts, but my suggestion would be four suggestions. One, to actually map your network and see who are the people you're not familiar with, and then either reach out to them, and that will help you either decide that someone is interesting to keep in touch with before disconnecting with them. You don't have, how many connections do you have on LinkedIn?
I think about 100 and something.
Okay. So mapping your network is actually a good idea for probably all job mob readers, because many people do not know what their network is up to and where is everyone now. So just going to my network and analyzing and viewing the list of 100 or more connections will help you, A, be reminded of some people you connected with maybe 4 years ago, and that'll make you think about opportunities. The second benefit will be for you to notice where they are, because maybe you connected with them when they worked for company A and now they've moved to company B. And the third thing would be to build a short list of people you're interested in keeping touch with no matter what. And then the maintenance is a tricky part. Jacob, what do you think about Sarah's question?
Yeah, first I just want to say hi to Robin. Thanks for joining. And so it's very similar to advice. A few years ago, I put together a book about Twitter, networking with Twitter and growing your presence on Twitter. And so it's very similar. I think it's really, really important to understand why you connect with someone. And so this, of course, it depends on a lot of things. Most people who are not active experts in this sphere or in the job search sphere, for example, or who are not born networkers and who don't thrive on just connecting with as many people as possible, and there are people like that, they're usually just going to be, it's going to be a hodgepodge of, let's say, some friends and some people from work and maybe some people that they met through work who are not colleagues, for example, and usually not too much more than that. Based on my experience. And so it's true that it won't be, in that case, it won't be too much of an effort to do what I really think is a good piece of advice, to map out that network. And then it makes it very easy when someone comes along, just ask yourself, why is this person connecting with me? Like if they're inviting you, why are they connecting with me? And so into which part of the map do they belong? And if they're an easy fit, then it's an easy yes to say, okay, I should connect with them because I've connected with people like that for a reason. And if they're not an easy fit into the map, well, then you say, well, okay, now I really have to have a good reason because now I have to change my map to fit this person in. And so do I want to do that? And of course, there are times where it makes sense to change your map. For example, you've started a new job or you've taken on a new hobby or you're reskilling. And so you want to learn about people who have that skill or experts in that field, et cetera. And so there are times where it makes sense, but it's true that very often, all too often, frankly, people abuse LinkedIn and other social media to network, so-called network, with people when really they're just looking for a way to get you to do something for them, whether it's buy something or something else. And so you can tell right away, and the kicker is that right away, after you accept their connection, they immediately hit you with something. And that's almost always when I say, okay, unconnect, and there goes that. but no, that's just the reality of the matter. And so yeah, so I definitely completely agree. And one thing I want to just come back to with the piece of advice that Daniel was giving you earlier is, if you are a regular, you are someone who wants to keep your network warm. And so let's say you have, as Sarah was saying, 100 or so odd connections. How do you choose? How do you choose who to network with first, who to spend your 15 minutes on? If it's a birthday or there's an occasion, although I can't stand LinkedIn's workiversary or whatever they call it, but if there is a specific reason, fine. But let's say there isn't something like that. Who do you choose after that?
Going back to the notification, you could turn off work anniversaries if you'd like.
Yeah, I know I've done it.
So it's easy. Let me suggest maybe three different steps, okay? And tell me if this makes sense to you. The first question would be the what. Ask yourself, if my company disappeared tomorrow, what sort of job would I be looking for? And these challenging times provide us with the opportunity to think and decide if we'd like to continue in the same course, have the same sort of positions, or transition to something else. The second stage would be to say, okay, how can I reach what I said I wanted to do? And then can I build a list of target companies now, a list of 20, 40 companies. The time to research companies is, again, something we have now more than ever, maybe. And that will make it easier for us down the road when this situation changes, to find people in those companies, to network, and to find better opportunities. And what I would suggest regarding what you said would be the third step, the how. If I had 120 connections, I would go over the 120 connections and pick up maybe 20 of the people I liked most but have lost touch with. That would be my criterion. Okay, people I enjoyed working with, people I remember, but somehow life made it so that we haven't been in touch for a year or two. And unless I reconnect and unless I reach out to them now, it'll be a lot more difficult and more challenging and less natural for me to do it, you know, when I need them. And now I would just ask how they've been. And I would just listen to what they're up to and not ask anything. And if by any chance I needed to reach out to that person in 6 months, both of us would feel a little better.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. One thing that I like as well is when you're looking around, and especially when you're mapping, if you're doing an initial mapping, as you were saying, then you're going to start getting ideas of who it's time or maybe time to reconnect with. But I just kind of flipping what we were criticizing on its head. Nobody likes to be reached out to when people want things from you, but they may not know that it is a good time to reach out to you because you could help them. And so if you, while you're doing that mapping or you're looking through those profiles, you see, you know what, maybe I can introduce them to someone, or maybe they'd be interested to know something that I learned recently. Well, to me, that's a good chance to reach out to someone and to say, you know, I see that you're doing this now, or maybe you happen to see that what they posted something recently that's relevant, and you can, as a follow-up in a way, you can say, oh, I thought you might want to know, and so forth and so on, because you're looking for a reason to help them now, which is obviously a much better way to reach out to someone. No one is going to say, I don't need your help. Go back to where you came from. I mean, who wouldn't like to have someone reach out to them every single day with some helpful, truly, really helpful information? And so that's something that I would also recommend doing if you can do it, if you can recognize that.
Sure. And just by reading those people's profile, in some cases you will have ideas.
Yeah.
Okay, just spending 60 seconds on a person's profile will help you see that they moved from company X to company Y.
Yeah.
And that will help you better reach out to them and hopefully helping them, because that would be the best thing to do.
Yep. I also like occasionally noticing mistakes and pointing them out to people, like, because a resume has the issue of intimacy, whereas that you've been working on this document so much that you don't even pay attention to the little details because it's become part of your brain basically, and that's why you want someone else to get a fresh set of eyes. And only then will they realize that you used a different version of its or their or whatever it is, a simple spelling mistake that stands out bluntly when you haven't stared at the document for hours on end. But if you notice something like that on a LinkedIn profile, just a simple typo that can really just leave a bit of a bad feeling. But again, it's understandable why the person didn't notice it. That's also a good thing to reach out to, a good excuse to reach out to someone and just say, hey, listen, I thought you might want to know. And by the way, what's happening? It's been a while, and so forth and so on. Like, oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sounds like a plan.
Cool.
You know,
no, I was going to say that anybody, a Rucker or Robin, anybody, if you have a question, just by all means interrupt at any point. This is meant to be open-ended, free discussion. So sorry, Daniel, continue with your thought that you were going to have.
One thing we discussed was someone updating his or her profile saying they've joined a new company.
Yeah.
Well, when you add a new position to your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn doesn't automatically end your previous employers.
Mm.
So if I started work now for Netflix and I used to work for Google, then my network would still get a congratulate Daniel for 20 years at Google or something. So even just checking someone's profile will provide you with a better ground for discussion, for mistakes you've noticed, or just for noticing what is happening in their professional lives.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I was working with someone a few months ago, and she had an executive role in an organization, and she hadn't updated her profile. It had already been a few months, I think, since she left there. And I said to her, you really want to do this ASAP because you had such an executive role. There's no way that two people could have that same role in that company. But right now, if they go on LinkedIn, yes, they will find two of those people in that role. So that's going to stand out. So you definitely want to update it ASAP. And she's like, oh yes, thank you for telling me. I hadn't thought about that at all. Yeah, again, it's not top of mind, of course, but it's definitely something that people should take seriously.
The more we wait, the more difficult it becomes, and the higher the price we pay.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like updating a resume. People will usually wait until after they've already left the company. They may not be able to access all the information about their achievements that they would have had access to if they had updated their resume while they were still at the company. They'll forget things. They're more likely to forget things because time has gone by. They may not be able to get the references, the recommendations because time has gone by. Yeah, no, there's no question. It's you want to keep it, your CV, your LinkedIn profile, you want to keep those things as warm as your network. You want to keep things updated. You want to keep them recent. Completely agree. It's just the best practice. And I get it. I understand. It's hard to be disciplined. It really, really is. It doesn't come naturally to most people to spend just a few minutes, not even a day, just a few minutes a week, as you were saying. It's not easy. Okay, 15 minutes, whatever. I'll do it next week. And then it becomes 2 weeks later, and then a month later, and then it just gets forgotten, and there goes that. There's so many things that we should be doing regularly, putting money aside, exercising, eating a certain way. It's a lot to think about. It's really not easy. But there's no question. If you want to get the best results and easier results when you need them, then it really makes sense to spend a little bit of time keeping things warm and updated.
So for some people, just adding an automatic reminder, say if you set aside 30 minutes every quarter, it should be enough. Okay, yeah. In general, it should, for most people, it should be enough. But unless you do it, then if 2 years go by and you try to remember what you've just accomplished, it's not going to work. It's going to take more time, and everyone who's going to hire you will look at your current position. So that's the part that needs to be written in the best possible way. And just adding some system that would make you review your experience and decide whether you'd like to update it. Again, it's a lot less time consuming, yeah, and a lot less painful.
What do you think? Do you think people are going to have an issue? Obviously, many people have been laid off in the past little while because of the downturn, the coronavirus and all that. Do you think people are going to have an issue with a resume gap because of this later on?
You know, I've seen a cartoon when some hiring manager asks the candidate, okay, there's a gap in 2020. What were you doing? And the answer was, I was washing my hands.
Right.
So we're still early in 2020, and yeah. I do think that if you started working for a company, you know, and we were not laid off until February or March, then it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And right. if it's really serious, then we'll have more tough challenges than this. Yeah,
no, I tend to, I think that when you have something that so many people are going through at the same time, they're not going to have a hard time remembering what this was, right? You're not going to have to explain, oh yeah, you remember the .com boom or whatever. And so it won't be too hard to explain it. I don't think that many people have an issue. However, it depends how long it takes them to get back to work. We don't know how long this is going to go on. This could go on Some people say this is going to be a new normal. It'll be the next flu. We can't say. And so if you were laid off because of the coronavirus situation, but you don't go back to work for a year, that's still not going to look great. And so it's going to depend ultimately on how long an individual situation goes on. It's interesting.
You're mentioning reskilling. Yeah. So one thing we could do is the more this situation lasts, the more it makes sense for us to learn new skills. And now's the time to do it. Again, if I know that I want to become an AWS expert and I need A, B, and C, then now's the time to do it. I can even LinkedIn has offered about 16 lynda.com courses for free, leading from a distance, and there are lots of free resources out there, and we have the time. It's never, it doesn't happen. Either we don't have time or it's, so just identify the skills that's most needed, and you will find a reasonable course that will not be expensive or that will not cost any dime.
So what would what would be your best tip on how to choose which skills using LinkedIn, but not necessarily, on choosing which skill to reskill?
If I can circle back to one earlier question, that's an excellent question. You can ask some people you're actually connected with.
Fantastic.
Okay, I want to go that way, and I noticed that you've made the same transition 2 years ago. I'm not sure whether should I do A or should I do B. It's an excellent question. People like to share their pieces of advice.
Yeah.
So you could, rather than doing it all yourself, use this as a topic for a conversation you would open with a meaningful conversation with someone you know.
I think that's you could even go more generally. In other words, you could say, okay, there was the advice of keeping your network warm a few minutes a week and so forth, but now we have the time, so let's reach out to as many people as possible. Again, in that section of your mapping where there's a work connection potentially, and saying, I'm considering reskilling like so many people are right now. What do you think would be a first skill that if I wanted to go into your industry or your whatever, what do you think it would be really something that would be valuable to learn right now that is in demand or that will be in demand soon, and that would really make me stand out as someone who learned that? Yeah, I think that's a great icebreaker that people will understand, especially even if they haven't spoken to you for a while. So yeah, I really like that idea. That's great. That's cool. Okay, so we're coming up on a half an hour. One more question, maybe Sarah or anybody else. Anybody have a question before we call it an evening or a day, depending on where you are? Okay. So wait, there was a question. So all right, this is from A. Rucker. When you have been laid off, should you hold off changing that info on your LinkedIn page or profile? What are the pros and cons to leaving it on until you find another job?
Okay, so I'll say this.
Thanks for that question.
If a rocker has to send his or her CV tomorrow, would the current employer be listed as a current employer? Yes or no? Would we have an ending date to that position? That's the easiest way to think about it. If you still send your CV out saying that you still work for that company, then don't change your LinkedIn profile. It could be a couple of weeks. It may be a couple of months, but comes a time that you will not feel comfortable showing that you work for that employer, and your credibility is going to be jeopardized in a very bad way. So as soon as you don't feel comfortable sending your CV saying that you still work for that company, that's the day I suggest you go to your LinkedIn profile and just end the current employer. And getting back to what you just said, Jacob, you can end the job in 2020 without specifying a month. if you don't want to.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of gives the impression you may still be working there. It doesn't look like a clean break.
Yes, and unless, if you've worked for the company until, December 2020, then I would actually suggest not to leave it as 2020, but, find the best truth to show. And in that case, the month would be a good idea.
Right. I mean, like they want to know if you're applying to a company and they want to know if you're available, and your profile doesn't make it look like you're available. That could be an issue, right? On the other hand, you don't want to make it look like you've been out of work for 6 months when that hasn't been the case.
Jacob, everyone's looking.
Right.
Okay, for every candidate that has been laid off, there may be 2 people who feel something is going wrong with their company.
Mm-hmm, sure. Fair enough.
Your competition as a job seeker, you don't compete just with other job seekers. You compete because the hiring manager doesn't wake up and say, okay, who's the best front-end developer who's looking for work? That's not the way they think.
Right. It's true. They're only too happy to take someone from another company. And in fact, many recruiters prefer that.
Absolutely.
That's a sad reality that makes job search harder for people who are unemployed. There's no question about it. Okay, so thank you for that question. And that was a good final question. We got some good questions today. I want to thank Daniel Alfin for being my co-host today. Just mentioning again, Daniel is as we all have seen, an expert on LinkedIn who wrote a book called How to Build a LinkedIn Profile for Business Success, an Ultimate Guide. I highly recommend going over to his website at danielalfin.com. All this information will be listed in the YouTube video notes after I upload the video to the site. And I'll have links there and everything. So anyone can connect with Daniel on LinkedIn. I'm sure he'll be only too happy to connect with anyone who was here for the call or who has watched it after the fact. So thanks again, Daniel. I really, really appreciate it. Thanks to everybody who joined today. And I'll try to get this up on YouTube as soon as possible. And my average right now is about a week from now. So I've got room to improve, but we'll see. Thanks again, everybody. And have a good evening, good day. Yeah, and a pleasure. And I'll probably be back with another chat next week. So see you then. Bye now.
Thanks.